Hello everyone, myself Ami Mehta, and in operating system, let us discuss what are the various process states, or we can say that the life cycle of a process. So basically, process states or process life cycle, what it indicates. So whenever a process is created, it is in the state of new, means it is in the new state because it is just created. Now whenever it is ready for execution, it is go into the state of ready. Now it is a single process. If a single CPU, then only one process can be executed at a one time. So but there are so many processes that want to execute. So these all processes are in the ready state. Whenever a CPU choose a one process, so it is this process is called scheduler dispatch. It will go into the running state. Now in running state, the process is executing, and whenever any input output required or event wait occur, it will go into the waiting state. So waiting for something occur, or after the input output completion or event completion, it again go to the ready state, not go to a running state. So it is not happening like this, because whenever a process, for example P1, is going into the waiting state, the CPU select the another process P2 for execution. So it may be happen that at particular that time process P2 is executing. So process P1 is going from waiting state to the ready state. Now then, if any interrupt will occur in the running state of the process, it will go into the ready state. And at the end, the process complete or finished, it goes into terminated state. So this is the whole process of how actually a process life cycle will work. Okay, so process will created, it is in new state, then after it will ready for execution, it will be in ready, then it is in CPU select that process for execution, it is in the running state, then after it is waiting for something input output or event occur, it is in the waiting state, then after if this event or input output operation complete, it will go to ready state. If an interrupt occur, the process will be directly moved from running to the ready state, and at the end process will complete and go to the terminated state. So now let us discuss in detail that a process is a dynamic active entity. It changes its states during time duration of its execution. Basically, a process state indicates current activity of a process, whether it is running, whether it is waiting, whether it is ready, whether it is terminated. It indicates this current status, current activity of a process. Each process may be in one of the following states during its lifespan. So these are the various different 5 states. The first one is new. When a process is first created, it occupies new state. In this state, process awaits to enter in ready state. It is waiting that it will enter in the ready state. Now the next one is ready. A process which is in ready state has been loaded into main memory. So in this state, process awaits for execution on a CPU. It is possible that more than one process may be in ready state at any instant of time, but in running state there is only single process. So process which is in running state is currently executing on a CPU, and in a one processor system, one and only one process can be in this state at a time. The next one is waiting. So a process which is in waiting state is waiting for some IO completion or some event to occur. So it is in the waiting for something input output completion or some event to occur. The next one is terminated. So when process terminates, it acquires this state. A process can terminate by completing its execution, or it can be killed explicitly. So these are the 5 stages of the process, or we can say that this is the whole process life cycle. Now what is the process and processor scheduling? This is more terminology, that scheduling is the process of making a choice which process to run next whenever more than one processes are simultaneously in the ready state. Scheduler is an operating system module which actually makes a choice of which process to run next whenever more than one process are simultaneously in the ready state. So scheduling is the process, scheduler is the module, and scheduling algorithm is an algorithm which is used by the scheduler in making a choice of which process to run next whenever more than one processes are simultaneously in the ready state. So these are the 3 terminology which are very important in the terms of process and process scheduling. The next topic we are discussing is process behavior. So process execution consists of a cycle of CPU execution and input output wait. Process alternate between these 2 states. Either it is executing in CPU or it is waiting for some input output. So process execution begins with a CPU burst. And what is CPU burst? So CPU burst is the time duration for which process executes continuously before waiting for an IO operation. So input output operation involves operation either related to reading an input from some device or a file, or writing an output to some device or a file. So these operations involves either related to reading or writing to something. So process alternates its execution between CPU burst and input output burst. In CPU burst, it requires CPU and instructions are executed sequentially. So process will be in the running state during CPU burst, but obvious when process is in the CPU, it is in the running state. In input output burst, process wait for some input output operation to complete and CPU becomes free. So the process will be in waiting state. We already discussed that in the process states. So this free CPU can be allocated to other process to allow it to run. So this free CPU we can allocate to another process. So depending upon the behavior of execution, processes can be classified as either it is CPU bound processes or it is IO bound processes. What is CPU bound and what is IO bound processes? So in which there is a long CPU burst time and short input output wait time, it is CPU bound processes. And in the next one there is a small CPU burst time and long input output waiting time, or the input output operation is required, it is called the input output bound process, IO bound process. So burst of CPU usage alternate with the periods of input output wait. So it is in CPU bound process, it contains a long CPU burst and thus infrequent IO wait. So it performs lots of computation and it does little input output operation. So it keeps the CPU busy most of the time. And in our IO bound process, it contains short CPU burst and thus frequent input output wait. So it performs little computation and it does lots of input output operation. So it keeps waiting for IO operation to complete most of the time. So this is the 2 types of process, either it is a CPU bound or it is a IO bound. So this is very important regarding operating system concept, that process states and the process life cycle and the behavior of it. Okay, thank you.